Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight for our webcast, results from the community assessment of Contra, Costa, and Alameda counties. I'm Dr. Sheila Darpino, Director of Research for Maddie's Fund. The San Francisco Bay Area has a passionate and talented group of individuals shelters and rescues, and I'd like to begin by thanking each of you for being a part of our life-saving community. Our speaker tonight is Bonnie Brown, President and founder of Humane Network. Humane Network works with animal welfare organizations across the U.S. to dramatically improve live release rates for dogs and cats entering shelters by employing sustainable, responsible life-saving strategies. Bonnie was also the executive director of Nevada Humane Society in Reno, Nevada for over 5 years, where she was instrumental in achieving a 94% save rate for animals coming into area shelters, making it one of the safest communities in the country for homeless animals. Before we start, let's talk about a few housekeeping items. Please take a look at the left side of your screen where you'll see a Q&A window. That's where you will ask questions during the presentation, and although Bonnie will answer those questions at the end of her presentation, please try to get them in early. If you need help with your connection during the presentation, you can click the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. This presentation will be available on demand within 24 hours, should you wish to view it again. Bonnie, thanks for being with us here tonight.
Thanks so much, Sheila. It's a pleasure to be here and really glad to be connecting with all of you again. I had the pleasure of meeting many of you when we were in the area for about a week back in August. And Diane Blankenberg, who was also along on that trip. And Diane is my colleague and the CEO of Humane Network, is going to be on the line along with me. So from time to time, you may hear Diane jump in with comments. And any of you who I didn't meet on the visit, well, you probably met with Diane because we had two different teams of people around doing site visits and connecting with you all there. So I'd like to start off by talking a bit about this project. Maddie's Fund had arranged with Humane Network for us to do a community assessment of Contra, Costa, and Alameda counties with the goal of exploring strategies that would help to increase the community-wide live release rate, ideally hitting 90% or better. And the results, a summary of which we are going to be sharing through this presentation with you momentarily, really were made possible by all of you. We are so grateful for the time that you each dedicated. We know how busy everybody is and really appreciated the time that you all took either for visits, to give us tours, to talk to us about your thoughts and experiences. And because of that, we were able to put this information together. Additionally, it was a pleasure to meet with you all. So we really just want to start off by saying thanks. Diane, did you want to jump in and comment at all before I
just to say hello, and I appreciate very much being a part of this project. And as Bonnie said, it was a pleasure to meet all of you and appreciate everything you all do for the animals. So I'll be here to jump in when I can or need to, and also to help answer questions at the end.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Okay, so to share a little bit more with you about the project, we figured we'd start off by talking about the goals. And we have two slides here that review at a high level the goals of this project. So first of all, we were looking to understand any obstacles that exist that keep the community from increasing the live release rate. We also wanted to take a look at the dynamics of the various organizations in the community. It's an active community. There's a wide variety of different types of groups. And so it was important for us to connect with everybody and get an understanding of how you guys all work together and the work of each of the different organizations. Additionally, we were looking for opportunities for collaboration between the organizations and the community. Additionally, we're looking to identify leaders within the community, organizations, and individuals with an interest and perhaps an ability to lead a community-wide effort to increase the live release rate in the community, or perhaps alternative strategies to some sort of single organization leading that effort. We also were looking for strategies to increase engagement of the public at large in the goal, and for specific actionable opportunities for increased life saving within the community that also may be something that Maddie's Fund or perhaps other opportunities to seek resources to help with this great effort. I think that sums it up. Diane, did you have anything to add on the goals?
No.
Great. Okay. This is the team that worked on this project of myself and Diane. Each led a site visit team in the community for a week. You probably either met with myself and Denise Stevens, or Diane, Abigail Smith, and Mitch Snyder. They were the second team, and between the two teams, we visited, I believe, most of the physical facilities in the area, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And the effort was also supported by Lisa Lane, who works with us in a variety of different ways, but also helped with a lot of the logistics for this project, as well as the survey and a few other things. So some of you may have also interacted with Lisa, particularly on the phone or through email. As far as what we did to gather the information, of course, before really launching into the project, we did some research about the community, about the organizations there. We looked at data, a lot of which was provided by Maddie's Fund, but also by some of you. We visited 22 different locations in the area and conducted a focus group meeting for rescue groups. 16 organizations were represented at the focus group, and in many cases there were multiple people at the meeting, so a given organization may have had 2 or 3 representatives there. We conducted 11 phone interviews with people who were either not available to meet with or who we spoke with before heading out. And lastly, we conducted a survey of rescue groups, particularly to reach those that were unable to attend the focus group meeting. And 19 different organizations responded to that survey, and 6 individuals did not identify an organizational affiliation, but there was a total of 27 respondents to the surveys. So one of the key things we were looking to do was to understand your perspectives, your experiences in terms of what you all feel and recommended for the direction that things would need to take in order to save more lives. So from this slide is based on feedback from the survey. One of the questions from the survey was, what are the top 3 things that would enable more lives to be saved? And there were 3 text fields, and people could fill out in each field one item that they, or one strategy, whatever, that they felt was critical to saving more lives. And here what you have are word clouds, and they represent the 3 different fields. And I think if you look at it collectively, you get a sense of what the survey respondents were saying was most important. If you're not familiar with word clouds, the way it works is the more often a word is repeated, the larger it appears. So you can see that there was attention and focus on spay as a common theme, funding, low cost, which we are assuming was connected with the spay concept. Education came through heavily, as did the word cats, and of course shelter, probably tied with all of these concepts. We, of course, looked at the entire survey result. There were many questions and a lot of different feedback that came out of that, which we took into consideration in our recommendations. But we also felt that the responses to this question gave you a good general idea of the kind of feedback that we got through the surveys. Now, additionally, as I mentioned, we conducted the focus group. We had multiple interviews, and there were the 22 site visits where we interviewed key staff. And from that, we compiled all of the information that we got and looked at the frequency with which different themes or topics came up in terms of the question, what would enable more lives to be saved? And on this slide is the sort of distillation of that input that we got in the order of frequency with which we got it. And the top one was spay-neuter, but this took on several different aspects, and people talked about if there were different concepts, I guess. So to elaborate, obviously there was a discussion about the concept of low cost and free spay-neuter, and the need for this for the public, but within that there were sub-focuses of organizations that were concerned about having sufficient spay-neuter services in order to get adopted animals quickly out of the shelter and into their homes. Additionally, there was a lot of discussion, understandably, about the concerns for public animals, but specifically we heard a lot about targeting it towards pit bulls, chihuahuas, and cats as the animals in greatest need. And lastly, the need for spay-neuter for trap-neuter return programs to support that effort. So those concepts are all tied in under that spay-neuter label. The second most common theme was veterinary services, and this was mentioned very commonly as critical to saving more lives. But again, the specific needs that were identified varied. I'd say most commonly they were related to rescue groups and shelters that lacked access to affordable care for treatable animals, and that was what we heard most commonly, I would say. The third most common theme that came through was marketing. This was often, I would say most often, mentioned in relation to pet adoption, but occasionally related to foster homes and volunteers. The fourth most common theme that we heard was Maddie's Fund's Treatable Animal Program. This was a program that I think are all familiar with, where organizations would reimburse for care costs for treatable animals. And this was obviously a program that was valued and missed when the program had run its course. And many of you cited the importance of this, particularly that it enabled your organization or other organizations to take more seniors or special needs pets. The fifth most common theme that we heard was that collaboration and communication would help increase life saving. And many people mentioned that they wished that there was more of this between the organizations, more communication and more collaborative efforts. The next area that was a theme that kept repeating was a desire for training and education. Now, perhaps not surprisingly, we often tend to feel that others need the training and education, not we ourselves, and that did come through to some degree. I think most frequently what I heard were people indicating how it would help another agency if they had access to this training and support. And lastly, the last most common theme that we heard related to specialized programs and resources. And this included meeting the needs of dogs with behavior problems, trap, neuter, return support, barn cat programs, treatment for cats with illnesses, particularly ringworm, came up repeatedly. So that is for us a summary of the most common themes of things that we heard from you guys that would enable more lives to be saved. Diane, do you have anything to add to that?
Not anything that add to the specifics here, but just to say that there were a lot of commonalities in at least all the groups that I specifically talked to, and of course in all the information that we gathered, which I always think is a good sign when it's clear that there are similar needs, I guess, across the community.
So thanks, Diane. So now I would like to ask you guys to let us know if you think we got it right or not. And I'm going to hit this little button here, and it should push out to you an opportunity for you to give a thumbs up or thumbs down about whether you think we heard you accurately when it comes to identifying what you saw as the needs for enabling increased life saving in the community. Waiting for those to come in here. So the question is if you think we nailed it or if we kind of missed it in terms of what you were trying to tell us was needed. Okay, it looks like, whoops, a few more are coming in here. We'll give it another second. While you're doing that, I also just want to remind you that you can ask questions. You can type questions into the Q&A box, and the team will be gathering those up to ask them at the end of the session so that we can hopefully get answers to you on that. Okay, so to end this, it looks like overwhelmingly or predominantly of the 20 people that responded, it seems that most people feel that we did a reasonably good job of representing what your sense of the needs were in the community. So thank you. We're relieved to hear that. After we got back, we did a great deal of looking at the statistics for the community. And I'm going to go over each of the communities' general picture for you as we looked at it. So this is Contra Costa County. Intake for the county is just over 27,000 animals. The euthanasia is below 5,000, and the live release rate for the community is at 83%, which is better than a lot of the communities where we work, and certainly I think shows all the hard work that you guys have put into the animals there. One thing we noted that was interesting was that with transfers, you're actually transferring out of the community 180 cats, and with dogs, we looked at the number of dogs coming in and the number of dogs going out, and overall you actually bring in 334 more dogs into the community than are transferred out, although that's sort of net. There are dogs that are leaving and there are dogs that are coming. And that we thought was just worth sharing with you in terms of transfer programs. what we don't know is which county they were, transferred in from. So that's something we'd have to do a little more digging to find out. Looking at Alameda County, the intake there is 27,000, euthanasia just over 5,000. That's a live release rate of 80%. Again, better than in many communities. In this case, you're actually transferring in 500 more dogs than are leaving the community and 150 more cats. And by in this, we're just looking at transfers in and transfers out. Of the 5,254 reported deaths of animals in shelters in Alameda County, 638 were listed as healthy, over 1,600 as treatable. And you can see that if those healthy and treatable animals were able to be saved and have a positive income, your live release rate would be at 89%. Now, of course, the question is always how animals are identified. That can always be a little bit in the eye of the beholder, and it is one of the benefits of having a community-wide agreement on how you're going to label animals, that those statistics become even more useful to you in the long run in terms of where to put effort. So the next thing that we did was take a look at statistics for your communities and also for some benchmark communities in terms of per 1,000 residents. And the reason why we do that is it begins to show apples to apples, because not only do people bring animals into shelters, they are also the people who donate to shelters. It's the people who could become foster homes or volunteers. It could be donors, pet adopters. So when you look at a shelter's or a community's statistics per 1,000 residents, it enables you to compare communities in a more meaningful way, we think, because you are looking at the variable of the human population. And so I'm going to share with you a few different charts and numbers that we put together. And of course, I'm going to start with the two target communities, Alameda and Contra, Costa, and the benchmark communities that we use. And we deliberately selected communities that are successful and doing well, because we know that's your goal, to do better. So those communities were Seattle, Washington, Alameda County, Virginia, which includes the city of Charlottesville, Portland, Oregon, Washoe County, Nevada, which includes the cities of Reno and Sparks, and Travis County, Texas, which includes Austin. And those communities are, of course, not going to be identical to yours, but they do have a cross-section in terms of the economics of the communities and the degree to which they're urban or rural, and poverty levels, which, even a community like Alameda County, while it's in many ways a wealthy community, there's also a significant percentage of people that live below the poverty level because of the higher cost of living. So anyway, we tried to pick communities that were doing well, but also had varied challenges, because every community does have its challenges. So the first slide here that I wanted to talk about shows live outcomes. So this means of all the animals that were impounded and all the possible ways they could have left a shelter alive. So this would include things like return to owner, pet adoption, of course, transfers of animals that leave the shelter. Now, of course, a foster care program is not a permanent outcome, so that is not reflected here. But permanent outcomes that result in animals leaving the shelter alive would count towards your live release. And the chart sort of shows it graphically, but below you can look at the numbers. Alameda County per 1,000 people You have 13 live outcomes. Contra Costa, it's 24 live outcomes per 1,000 people. Seattle, it's 20. Alameda County, 33. Portland, 44. Washoe, 49. And Travis, 29. And so, you know, what we hoped and what you would see and what we saw when we first did these numbers was that there really is an opportunity to us, when we look at this, to increase live outcomes just based on the potential within the communities population-wise. You can also see the second row is the percentage of, so that's the live release rate, just as a percentage rather than per 1,000 residents. So next, what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to talk a little bit about perceptions, because we hear you and we understand, you know, a lot of the things that that we need when we're in a shelter environment from a day-to-day basis. And, you know, our minds are using the available information that we have from the input we get daily. And working in a shelter or working with a rescue group, our goal and our wish is to see fewer animals entering shelters. And so we have a very normal reaction of seeing these animals enter the shelters day in, day out. And no matter what number were coming in, I think we would all be wishing that it was fewer. So it's also helpful, given that very natural perception that we all have about the volume of animals that we're handling, to look at it in comparison to other communities. And I think it can help to determine just how serious is the burden at any given location. Where does the focus need to be to most effectively increase live release and reduce shelter intake? And looking at the hard numbers, I think, are beneficial. Again, not to say that we don't want to be working on reducing shelter intake, but to demonstrate the capabilities and what results have been achieved in other communities. You know, our brains just really naturally tend to fill gaps and draw conclusions, and sometimes when we look at statistics, they can show us a different way to look at things. So that's, in fact, what we saw when we ran the adoption numbers for the community. And again, there's many ways animals can leave a shelter alive. This is just looking at actual pet adoptions. And you can see the numbers at the bottom. Alameda County places 17 dogs and cats per 1,000 residents. Contra Costa, 24. Seattle is actually just a slight bit lower than Alameda County at 16. Alameda County places 32 dogs and cats per 1,000 residents. Portland and Washoe County are up over 50, and Travis County is 31. So you can see you know, for some of these, oh, you know what? I just did this totally wrong. That's intake. I'm so sorry. Yeah, Diane, you should have corrected me. I'm so sorry. This is intake,
I
so
was
my
going
mistake.
to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, eventually, yes. Sorry, guys, my confusion. This is shelter intake numbers. So that's the number of animals coming into the shelters. So I have to start that again just so you can absorb it a little bit. So Seattle actually has the lowest per 1,000 shelter intake of all the communities that we looked at. But Alameda is second, and then Contra Costa, and then Travis County. And so you can look at these and see that while it's clearly advantageous to do all that we can to keep animals out of shelters, it does not necessarily have to be a barrier. And in fact, in many ways, your communities are doing better than many other communities are in this area. So I think that, again, you know, to keep in mind with this, it does not mean that a given organization or a given shelter is not overwhelmed and doesn't need help. That's not necessarily the case. But as a community, when you look at it as a community as a whole, there really is an opportunity that that you have that a lot of communities really are still struggling with in terms of that really fairly low intake. Again, I know when you're seeing animals coming in the front door, it's never going to feel low. But when you compare it, per human population to other communities, I think it says a lot about really what a good job you already have done in terms of getting the message out about spay neuter and taking responsibility for pets. So, sorry, now that I got that backwards, these are the adoption statistics for the counties. And again, this is what showed to us a dramatic opportunity for Alameda and Contra Costa County. You guys are respectively at 7 and 11 adoptions per 1,000 residents. Seattle is at 12, and Travis County at 15. Washoe at 23, Albemarle 26, Portland 31. So you can see what is possible in terms of adoption with really solid promotion, we feel, in terms of the capacity to really move animals into the community. And beyond that, we ran a few numbers that I would like to share with you. Let me look at these here. So the current adoption rate in Contra Costa County is 11 per 1,000 residents. And again, this is not bad. We have certainly seen communities where it is substantially lower. But if adoptions in the community were increased by just 2.5 adoptions per 1,000 residents, that would bring your adoption rate up to 13.5, and you would be at a 90% live release rate. If the adoptions were increased by just 4 animals per 1,000 residents, you'd be at the same adoption rate as Travis County, and that would mean that you'd be placing an additional over additional 4,000 animals, about 4,400 animals. In theory, that would mean that there would be placement for all of the animals that were euthanized in 2014, which was just below 4,200. Now, of course, we do understand in reality some of those animals were euthanized because they were not going to be placeable if they were too sick or injured or dangerous. But I think that when you begin to look at it that way in terms of the potential of just increasing adoptions by 4 per 1,000 residents, which has been done in other communities. In fact, in some communities it's been done in a single year and more, greater increases. So to us, when we look at these numbers, we see tremendous potential to achieve your goal. Now, Alameda County is at 7 adoptions per 1,000 residents, which is a little low, and I think it's almost certain that there's potential to increase it. So if adoptions were increased by just 1.7 adoptions in Alameda County per 1,000 residents, that would bring your adoption rate up to 8.7 per 1,000 residents, and you would be at a 90% live release rate. If they were increased by 3, so just 3 more adoptions per 1,000 residents, that would bring it to 10 per 1,000 people, which is still a little below what it is right now in Contra Costa and below all the benchmark cities. Just the same, you'd be placing, again, 4,800 animals more than you're placing now, and all but 98 of the animals that were euthanized in 2014 would be placed. So again, we do recognize that some of the animals that were euthanized were obviously euthanized because there was nothing else that could be done for them. But simply by increasing the number of adoptions done in the community, to us it looks like that this is a fixable problem in many ways. that said, I would like to see what you think about that. So we're going to, again, send out that little voting mechanism for you. Before I do that, I wondered if Diane, did you have anything you want to add or mention, Diane, about these numbers?
Not about the numbers specifically, but as if you want to go ahead and do that while I'm talking, I was just thinking about Washoe County, which was my experience. I was with Bonnie there for the 6+ years, and I have to say that we had a community that ranked the lowest in all the things you didn't want to be low in. I mean, that you didn't want to be low in, and high in all the things you didn't want to be high in, and we had it was a very challenging community. So it was actually a pleasant surprise to see how much we could increase the adoptions there in a short period of time, and mostly just through aggressive marketing.
Yes, absolutely. And you don't have to be shy if you disagree and don't think it's doable, but just interested in seeing your vote on this. If you feel that looking at the numbers gives you a new perspective and you think that perhaps we could increase adoptions by, say, 4 per 1,000 residents in our community and realize the target live release rate.
And while we're waiting for everyone's responses to that, I just want to remind everyone to submit your questions in the Q&A box so we can answer them at the end.
We're getting there. So far we have 14 responses. If anybody else wants to indicate yay or nay on this whole concept of increasing adoption, it's the time to do it. Okay, well, in the interest of moving on, we're going to wrap this up, and I'll tell you what how this has come in so far. 13 respondents indicated thumbs up, and 2 indicated that they're not convinced. Just got another there, so it's 14 with we think it's possible, and 2 kind of not sold on this concept. So thank you. We appreciate your feedback on that. Okay, so after looking at all of this and a lot more, I mean, realistically, it took us a lot of time to go through all the data, so we are hitting the highlights here for you, not going over every single thing that we looked at in our recommendations. I'm going to quickly, on this one slide, we've summarized the recommended approaches that we made in the report, and then I'll just go back and quickly go over them, and Diane will jump in on each of them if she has anything to add, and then we'll be at the point where you guys will be able to ask us questions about all of this. So very, very briefly, the recommended opportunities that we saw were to enhance the efficiency of flow of animals through organizations, and by that we did mean beyond shelters, for positive outcomes. Marketing for pet adoptions, adopting best practices, creating a coalition. Those were the 4 top opportunities we saw for achieving the goal of increasing the live release rate in the community. And for strategies, we had 2 recommendations. One was define funding opportunities for achieving specific results, and the other was incentives. And we'll go on and explain what each of those meant here. So enhancing the efficiency of the flow of animals through organizations for positive outcomes. So the opportunities that we saw there included identifying solutions for some of the shelters and rescues that are experiencing bottlenecks, particularly in providing timely spay-neuter or vet care to move animals into homes. Secondly, solutions for TNR groups to meet the desire for free and low-cost spay-neuter and vet care for community cats, and assistance and guidance to develop fundraising strategies to cover the cost of treatable animals. Many rescue groups really are paying fairly high fees, and so any kinds of solutions to that. And having said this, we want to mention that, from our perspective, there's multiple ways to fund these things. So we'll talk a little more about that later. But anyway, that came out of what we saw as the mention and pretty real information that we received from you guys about some of the challenges that really would make a difference and enable you to move animals or to provide life-saving solutions more effectively. The second one is marketing to increase pet adoptions. And having looked at the statistics, we really believe that there is the potential in the community to drive more people to choose pet adoption in the community and to find placement for more of the animals that are entering shelters. And to do that, our experience is that it really requires relentless and ongoing promotion. And in your communities, we feel that would mean bilingual, possibly even trilingual in some areas, messaging about pet adoption. Diane, feel free to jump in on any of this.
I will.
Adopting best practices. We felt that support and guidance to assist groups that wanted to rethink processes and update policies to maximize life-saving and make the most of their existing resources, particularly certainly in the form of presentations and workshops that are really targeted towards the very specific areas where there is a need, but also in many cases consulting assistance. When you're working in a shelter day in, day out, there are so many demands and things are just coming at you, and it's very hard to set aside time to, say, redo the adoption questionnaire or retrain the volunteers who do off-site adoption. And so often we find that really what's needed is practical help to make that happen. Generally, what we heard were that some of the larger nonprofit and municipal shelters, areas where they could, and again, none of this is universal, this is very individual, may apply to one organization and not at all to another, but areas around community cats, from return to field to TNR, surrender intervention to keep pets in homes, particularly those that are going to be the hardest to rehome if they do end up in the shelter, foster care programs, marketing options for shelters to increase adoption, increasing the numbers of and engaging volunteers, and fundraising for special needs pets. And for the smaller rescue agencies, the areas that seem to would most benefit from this kind of support and information were adoption policies, foster care programs, best practices for community cats, and increasing and engaging volunteers. So again, none of those apply universally, but that's just a summary of the information we gathered and felt was potentially had the greatest impact to help. The third point was creating a coalition, and coalitions have the benefit of not only providing some leadership, but monitoring progress and fostering teamwork. Some of the advantages are things that we heard from you in our travels and discussions there, included things like opportunities to collaborate and reduce duplication of effort on programming, as well as potential for, say, even collaborative purchasing had been suggested a couple of times, opportunities for specialization for organizations, and the creation of shared definitions for statistics, which makes them more valuable in terms of assessing where needs are. And then now we're into the strategies, and during our interviews, one person that we spoke to, who we won't embarrass by naming them, made a really great comment that we wrote down as a quote, and the comment was, people can make their case for what they will do, how that is truly going to save more lives in the community. And the benefits of this kind of a funding approach is that you're taking advantage of the power of initiative and creativity that certainly exists in abundance in all of you. And it also enables a specific and measurable outcome to be achieved with funding. And the second strategy recommendation we had related to incentives, and it could take the form of a financial bonus that would relate to things such as pulling animals locally, reducing the length of stay with a positive outcome, and exceeding a goal or time frame for a specific program or approach that had already been approved for funding, for example. So well, before I conclude, Diane, did you want to chime in and talk about any of those points? Or did I cover it?
Just that oh no, I think you covered it. I just think they're very, well, I'll let you do the conclusion, then I'll comment.
Okay. Well, one thing that was really abundantly clear to us was the really amazing work that you all have been doing in the community, and we think that your statistics show that, and that it is not going to be hard to get to the point where you're seeing the results that I think a great many of you want to see, which is that 90% or higher live release rate. So we just saw abundant evidence of your great work, and also of the generosity and commitment of Maddie's Fund to the community, which was really just really a great combination to see. And from our perspective, looking at the community, we really felt that it seemed entirely doable to achieve a 90% or substantially better live release rate for the animals in these communities with your continued dedication and perhaps a targeted investment, not only financial, but really of energy and effort in specific ways that are going to generate the greatest life-saving results. Diane, did you want to talk a little bit? I do want to push out one last question to people. So.
Sure. And I guess I just wanted to emphasize those last couple points, because we've worked with organizations and communities all over the country, and I can just say full-heartedly that I was extremely impressed with everything that has been accomplished there, and the commitment, and I totally believe and support what Bonnie just said, that it's very doable. Sometimes it seems like those last, to get to that make that last jump is more challenging, but I feel like you're so positioned to do that it really can be done, and isn't that hard. Not that it doesn't take effort, but so that's
absolutely.
I just wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah, so from our perspective, I mean, we're really excited about what we see in the future for the community. However, we also know from real experience, as you guys do, that on a day-to-day basis, it's hard. So I just would like to ask one parting question here that we're going to push out there to you. Another one of the little voting things, if I can get it to pop up. We'd just like to hear, do you believe that it's going to be possible for the community to achieve 90% or better live release rate, or do you think this goal is far off? Or I'd love to hear what you think. We're getting there. We have 12 votes in. Anyone else want to weigh in here? 14 now. Okay. Well, we have 17 responses, and of those, 14 are feeling that, yes, this has actually worked to 18. 14 are feeling that this is an achievable goal. 4 are not sure or don't think so. Let's see, we just got another, okay, so we're up to 19, 15 are a yes, and 4 are no. So anyway, we appreciate your time this evening, and I'm going to hand things back to Sheila Rapino, who will lead us in some questions now.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. Very interesting information. We're going to be answering questions now. If you have a question and haven't submitted it, now is the time to do so. Our first question is, do you have euthanasia numbers broken out by cat versus dog and by medical versus behavioral?
We do have them by cat versus dog. Most of the shelters in the community have been reporting these, and they have been combined by Maddie's Fund. We also have them as groups report them for healthy, treatable, and non-rehabilitatable animals that are not going to be savable. But what we don't have is of those numbers that are deemed treatable, if the treatable condition is medical or behavioral, or if the animals that we euthanized were euthanized for medical or behavioral reasons, although we do know if they were deemed healthy, treatable, or beyond help. So does anyone from Maddie's Fund want to articulate that better than I just did? I don't believe we know, though, if they were medical or behavioral.
No, I don't believe we have that level of detail either. But we can look that up and share that information with the person who asked the question. I'm going to move on to the next question, but before we get to that, I want to let everybody know that we will be going over time a bit because there are a number of good questions, and so we'll go over time to get to all of these questions, and I hope that you will stick with us. Our next question, we have a couple questions about data. The next is, how were the adoptions counted? Did they include all shelters and rescues, and whose database?
The adoptions were those that have been reported to Maddie's Fund as adoptions. We did not include any other kind of live release in those adoption numbers. So my sense from looking at the list of organizations that report to Maddie's Fund, it was pretty comprehensive, but it's possible that they're slightly higher if there are organizations that did not report. But there are a substantial number of rescue groups, some reporting very few adoptions in the course of a year, but even those were counted in those numbers, as they were in the comparison numbers that we used. The comparison communities also were reporting the same way and to Maddie's Fund. Hope I'm answering your question.
Bonnie. Next question is also about adoptions. There are many different types of adoptions. What do you consider an adopted cat? By private party or by a rescue group, for example?
Well, again, these are all the way the groups report them, but in the reporting document, you are supposed to be separating out transfers. So if you sent an animal to a rescue group, that would be reported as a transfer, and it would be reflected in the live outcomes, but it would not be reflected in adoptions. So again, there is never in all statistics that are gathered from shelters a way to actually determine the accuracy of the reporting, but generally my sense talking to shelters is most of them are trying hard to report their data accurately. So the answer would be just by individuals adopting. The adoption number would not or should not have included a rescue group transfer. Now, if a rescue group reported the adoption, then yes, those numbers would be counted, but they would have been reported as a rescue group, as an adoption to a private party.
Great, thank you, Bonnie. Next question about data as well, and that is, were the animals from Contra Costa County not accurately labeled as healthy and treatable to get the same statistics for this county?
They actually were, but in Contra Costa, the way it looks, and again, without coalitions where shelters agree to each other and commit to each other that they're going to report animal status in a certain way. In other words, if all the shelters in the community don't agree that healthy means something in particular to them and treatable means something in particular to them, and they all agree to report it that way to each other, then you have a lot of variables in there. So that's where a coalition has great value, when everyone agrees to sort of report apples to apples. There's always going to be human judgment involved, of course, but you get better data when everyone is agreed to be on the same page. And when we looked at the Contra Costa, there wasn't really anything as noteworthy as there was in Alameda. And in some cases, we don't honestly know whether that is because the reporting is so accurately labeled or the opposite. But looking at it, there wasn't a situation where you looked at a large number of animals that were labeled healthy that were being euthanized, which was the case in Alameda.
Thank you, Bonnie. Next question. How would you go about encouraging municipal shelters to share their load of animals after stray hold so that some don't sit empty and others have 8 dogs per kennel? This seems a major cooperation opportunity unused because of jurisdictional divide.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the question is that the municipal shelters should share the animals with other municipal shelters, but that sometimes does pose issues because in some communities the municipal shelter, they're going to be taxpayer funded, and so the taxpayers are paying to house only the animals from their municipality. So while occasionally you will get animal services shelters that will take transfers from other communities, it is not as common as private nonprofit organizations being able to do that. But I also realize from the question that may not be what you're trying to say. And the only way that I can really think of to answer that is to say that I think coalitions are so incredibly helpful in this regard, and you guys have a great model of one nearby, the We Care Coalition in, is it Santa Clara County, if I'm remembering correctly. I think is a great example of what can be done. And there the private humane society and the municipal shelter have really deliberately worked together to address the problems and support each other. And that is what we see in many communities seems to work well. Diane, did you want to comment on this? Maybe you understand it differently than I do.
Well, I read it the same way you answered it in the beginning, and that it was between municipal shelters, but if it's between private and municipal, that's certainly something that we were able to accomplish in Washoe County, where we took the responsibility at Nevada Humane Society to offload or transfer the animals after their stray hold period, so that it did free up the kennels at their shelter. But I'm not sure if that's what they meant either.
Thank you both. We'll go ahead and move on to the next question. Is there any feedback on how we collectively can move away from the perceived magical number that has been deemed the live outcome percentage as the only measure of a shelter's success? Numbers can be skewed.
I guess I think that I guess I understand the point of the question. I think that the point of the question is that there's skepticism about the value of the 90% benchmark. And I agree. I actually think communities are going to differ widely in terms of what is possible. Perhaps there are communities at which, 88% is the best they're ever going to do because so many of the animals are very sick and injured, and they've already done everything humanly possible to reduce intake. So the intake number has dropped precipitously over the years, and the animals that they are getting are the ones that we all feel ought to end up in shelters, which are really the neediest and the ones for which there is no other good option. And in that case, it's possible, I think, that that things will actually tip in the other direction because of the animals you get. Fewer are going to be savable. But I understand the point, but I also think there is some value, and I think that the public views our role primarily as life-saving, and so I think that if we're reluctant to look at our results, our life-saving results, I think we have to look at why. And yes, sure, there's obviously other numbers that speak to the greatness of a shelter. One of them for me would be really community engagement, and how engaged is the community in what the shelter does. Does the shelter support people rather than judge them? I think that's another wonderful marker of a great organization. On the other hand, if an organization is stockpiling large sums of money and animals are still being euthanized, or there are many animals in need in the community, that to me raises a question about the intent of the leadership of the shelter to really fulfill what I think a donor views as the mission, which is by and large helping animals with those funds that they're giving. So I agree on the one hand that there are measures that are important to look at that have nothing to do with live release rate, but I also think that for a very long time shelters ignored that responsibility to the lives of animals, and I think that honoring life and understanding that each life that we take is a life that we really can't restore, and therefore it is precious, and that it ought to be a decision that we make because we've exhausted the other options, and not just because it was the most convenient option or one that we can find a way to justify. So I guess I see value in it, although I do understand, yes, of course, there are other measures of a great organization. Diane, did you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I think I just always viewed it as a benchmark, as Bonnie said, and there are other benchmarks that one can use, but if you say, in our case, that we were going to save all the healthy and treatable, as Bonnie mentioned, you can define healthy and treatable quite a few different ways too. So I think none of it's absolute, and it's kind of understanding the spirit of it, which I think is what Bonnie was trying to define there. But I don't think it hurts to have benchmarks. I think where I personally have trouble with it when someone uses it so absolute that if somebody is at 88 or 89 or something less than, but they are doing all those right things to save as many as possible, then they don't get the credit for it. It's tough because numbers and words can be used and defined in order to support what we already think sometimes. But I think it's great to have benchmarks and to have different kinds of benchmarks so that we make sure that we're at least shooting for something that's going to maximize the life saving.
I mean, I understand that sense, and I've heard other, shelter directors talk about this, and I understand the concern, but I feel like for so very long the sheltering community did not look at this issue and didn't want to give any legitimacy to the fact that maybe we were euthanizing more animals than necessary, that we need to pay it its due, and then over time, yes, we'll begin looking at all these other benchmarks of what is a great shelter and what is a shelter that really meets all the needs of the community and engages the community and perhaps is much more than a shelter, is a center for animals in the community and people who care about them. So, ideally, ultimately, it's about creating a humane community, but I think for us, we've got to be demonstrating that that we get that life is precious, and then we'll be setting ourselves up to be that community, that the beacon of a humane community. I do understand the frustration some people have with that sort of one-note viewpoint, but I think it's a really important note, and all the more so because we minimized it for many years in this field.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. And we have a number of questions still left, so we're going to try to get to them all. We'll do our best to move through them quickly. Our next question is for you, Diane. Diane, what about a continuum of service for saving cat lives? There's nothing mentioned about this.
I'm not exactly sure what that means. Bonnie, do you have a feel for what the question is?
I don't either. I mean, I think that, we mentioned multiple times the importance of support for TNR, and, certainly we feel that for most shelters it's important to be embracing a program where community cats, those that are not going to be able to be adopted, are returned so long as they're in reasonable health. But yeah, I'm afraid it's not too clear to me what it means either.
We will go ahead and move forward. If the person who asked that wants to clarify a bit more, please do in another question. Next question is, where can a person volunteer to have the most impact?
Do you want me to answer that, Bonnie?
Sure.
Unless you had. Well, I just was going to
say,
you certainly add on to this, but I was just going to say that I really think it depends on the particular organization that one wants to support and what your skills are. I think that most organizations, I wouldn't say most, all organizations need help. And I think one of the things that I found in working for a shelter for many years is that I really appreciated people asking us how did they most, or what way did they most need the help, and how could that person use their talents to best help us. So I just believe that it's up to the individual organization what they need and what your specific skills are, and to ask the shelter or the rescue group what will have the biggest impact.
Thank you. Great answer, Diane. Next question is, will the statistics be made available by county and by organization? I would like to fully understand how the numbers were compiled.
The data was reported to Maddie's Fund, so I think that's going to end up being a Maddie's Fund question. I believe some of it is reported publicly and is on the Maddie's website, but I think that's probably better answered by someone at Maddie's Fund.
That is my understanding as well. Don't quote me on it, but my understanding is that it is that data is viewable on our website. But I will also look for confirmation from that from others on the team. And while we're waiting for that, I will push forward to the next question. And that is, increasing adoptions doesn't address the root case of where these animals are coming from, i.e. unfixed cats and dogs in the community. Providing affordable services for spay-neuter, I would think, would reduce the number of unwanted animals being born.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we were trying to show, and unfortunately I got ahead of myself with the labeling the slides, but, you know, certainly never would say that it wasn't a good thing to neuter animals. In my opinion, it is important. I think it helps in many ways, but what we were showing there was that your community already has a lot fewer unwanted animals than a lot of communities. Again, and not at all suggesting you should stop spaying and neutering the animals, but that you're already doing a lot better at this than a lot of places, and that the volume of animals that are coming into shelters really don't need to be viewed as unwanted necessarily. Now, I understand, you know, if you're getting a large number of, say, pit bulls or chihuahuas, that those animals are going to be harder to place. And yes, I do feel that focusing spay-neuter efforts on animals that are coming in such abundance that they have long lengths of stay, which isn't certainly ideal for the animals themselves, but that makes a great deal of sense. But just looking at the numbers, apart from you know, any particular breed issue, I think you can see that they really are absorbable in the communities, and a lot of communities that have a great many more animals, statistically speaking, coming into the shelters are finding live outcomes for those animals. So while I would never discourage you on the spay-neuter front, I would say that the community, just statistically, you can look at it and see that there is a tremendous opportunity to increase live outcomes. I guess I do not see these two things as exclusive. I think that we can work on spaying and neutering aggressively, and we can save the animals that are coming into our care today. And I think when we ask the public to value their pets, we need to be showing that same value, and that means doing everything we can to get the animals that come to us into our shelters back out alive when we can, because it is showing. You know, I know there's a lot of talk about the 5 freedoms, and I think they're great, but to me, you know, that we should really be adding on to them the concept of, you know, preserving life being the first and foremost of those freedoms.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Our next question is, how does Maddie's Fund plan to help address these conclusions? And I just realized I needed to comment on one thing before we get to that question. With the questions about statistics and the access to the statistics, all the statistics are available via our comparative database on the Maddie's Fund website, so you do have access to them all.
So this question, well, I'll just answer it, and then someone else can jump in if they want. Our understanding is that Maddie's Fund is taking all this under advisement, and they're in the middle of their strategic planning efforts. So they are still making decisions about, you know, not just this information, but their entire strategy. So in the future, once that is decided and firmed up, Maddie's Fund, I'm sure, will share that with you.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Definitely agree with that answer. The last question that we're going to address for the evening is, I noticed that municipal shelters are also attempting high live release numbers, but often resulting in major overcapacity issues. What are your thoughts on that function of municipal shelters moving forward?
Well, I mean, I guess what I read as an underlying question is, you know, if shelters are housing animals in such a way that it's causing a lot of stress, or there are very long lengths of stay, I think that to me, adoption promotion is one way to address that issue. I think transferring animals to capable rescue groups, but again, they really need to be supported too with adoption marketing. Private organizations can do adoption marketing and dramatically increase their capacity, and I've seen municipal shelters do that as well. Some that we have worked with have done some incredible things, and I am talking about municipally funded shelters. I do think that, you know, we all owe it to the animals to be caring for them in as humane and responsible a manner that supports their health, both physical health and psychological health, and that we're making every effort to reduce length of stay, which again to me, adoption is a big key in that. It's when you have a large number of people arriving at your shelter every day looking for pets, it's a lot easier to keep that length of stay low and get animals quickly into homes. The other thing that I would add about this point is that this is also where I think a coalition can help. If there is a given shelter within a community that's having a challenge with proper care standards, other organizations in the community can work together to help and get a resolution that's humane for the animals and helps the shelter to get on track so that they are providing the kind of care that we really all want to see for the animals. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in there, but Diane?
No, I think you answered it. I think that the same thing apply to municipal shelter as any other shelter as far as how you increase your live release rates. Not just because they're a municipal shelter that they have to be confined to only doing certain kinds of things.
Thank you both very much. We're very close to the end of our event. We want to thank Bonnie, Diane, and all of you for your time tonight. This webcast will be available on demand shortly for people who registered but weren't able to attend, and for those of you who are here tonight. We will also be sharing the report that we've talked about tonight with everyone who is on our list for this event, and we'll email you when it is available. Thanks again for being here with us this evening, and good night.